I'm pleased to be joined by Admiral Mike Rogers, who served as Director of the National Security Agency when President Biden was VP and then under former President Trump. Okay, here you are, Mike.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great to be with you. Thank you for joining us. And of course, thank you for your service as well.
No, I should be thanking you. I got to do something I loved and always wanted to do.
That's great. So Admiral Rogers, you've been all over the globe recently, from China to Israel to Australia and more. My question to you is, how is the rest of the world looking at this election?
Everywhere I go, I get three questions about the election. Number one, who's going to win? Number two, could you help us understand what is going on? Because we find the dynamic as we watch you, the United States, it's perplexing to us, and we're a little confused by the rhetoric. And a kind of secondary, how did you wind up with these two individuals as the primary candidates? And then thirdly, and probably the one that is of the greatest concern to most people I see globally, is so if President Trump were to win re-election, what would that mean for U.S. policy towards my nation, my region, the issues that I care about? I'm in Tel Aviv as I'm speaking to you, and I have, in the last week, been bombarded with what would the difference in U.S. policy towards Gaza and Israel in general be under President Trump versus a President Biden, depending on who won.
Okay. Big questions. So in an earlier conversation, we touched on evolving trade dynamics, but more broadly, how do you expect the relations between U.S. and China to evolve in the coming years?
So remember, President Trump during his presidency was the individual who kind of started us down this more aggressive, hey, we need to confront China, we need to be more direct, and we need to use leverage as a vehicle to attempt to change certain aspects of Chinese behavior. So I would fully expect if he wins, he would still be committed to that, as if President Biden were to win re-election, I would believe that he too would be committed to this fundamental idea we have to continue to press China more. President Biden tended to view technology and economic policy as the best ways to try to change China's behavior, working in partnership with others. President Trump, and I worked for President Trump, and I got to work with President Biden very closely as vice president. President Trump during his time seemed to believe, hey, look, we need to confront China more aggressively. We'll do it with technology, but he seemed to believe trade and tariff policy broadly is really the best vehicle to try to change China's behavior in certain areas.
Okay. And then, you know, obviously this election is coming at a pivotal time for global security, with the two wars going on with Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Hamas. And you mentioned that you're actually joining us from Tel Aviv today. How do you see the election impacting these conflicts?
Well, clearly, I think everyone's looking to see, does an election represent in some ways either a fundamental shift in U.S. policy with respect to Ukraine, China, Israel? And then also, I think people are trying to ask themselves, can we count on America to be fully, whoever wins, can you count on the United States to be fully engaged and to be fully committed? You get that very much in the Ukraine scenario, and you get that very much in the Gaza scenario right now.
Okay. And then one last question I have for you, Admiral Rogers. You know, I mentioned earlier that you worked both with Trump and Biden. So what is the overall key takeaway you would leave our audience with in terms of how either candidate would impact American foreign policy?
So President Biden believes strongly that an America that is engaged aggressively in the broader world is a good thing for the United States as well as for the broader world that we're a part of. And that the best way for America to be aggressively engaged with that broader world is to do it in a multilateral kind of framework, to do it in partnership with others. When I worked for President Trump, I would say his slightly different. His view was America should be selectively engaged in issues where our core national security interests are at stake. So, for example, it's one of the arguments he has made about Ukraine, arguing, is it really a core national interest for the United States? Is the level of effort, financial support, commitment, et cetera, is it really justified? And the other thing that you heard from President Trump when I worked for him was he felt very strongly that America's strength was underestimated by some nations around the world, and that therefore America should feel more comfortable acting unilaterally on issues that it felt strongly about, that America, and by extension, he as the president, believed were important to our nation's security. So two very different kind of visions, which is one reason why that third question I always get, what would be the difference if President Trump were, particularly in Europe? I mean, Europe is the area I think that I visit, I spend time in around the world that seems to be the most concerned about, would a President Trump victory fundamentally change the nature of the relationship between the United States and Europe, the United States and NATO, the Ukraine issue, et cetera?
Yeah, definitely less interest in allyship in that case. Thank you, Admiral Rogers, for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. I hope that you found the discussion as insightful as I did. As always, I encourage you to follow up with your UBS financial advisor to discuss what this all means for your own portfolio. And we will continue to feature a steady stream of insights leading up to the November elections from both our CIO team and external experts, like you heard from today. For the latest, you can always visit ubs.com/ElectionWatch. Thank you.